Good morning, everybody. There goes a perfectly good minute of my introduction, but I did owe it to church. So there you go, with sound. I have a few announcements I'd like to make before we start with the speakers. Many of you have been asking about the presentations. All presentations and posters will be posted very soon at our website, so wait for them. Also wanted to announce that Igor Krupnik had a family emergency, so he won't be able to present this afternoon. Instead, Dr. Harry Stern from the University of Washington Polar Science Center is going to be talking to us about navigability indicators for the Northwest Passage and the Northern Sea route. So be aware of that. The schedule timeline will stay the same other than that switch. I'd like to remind you that if you bring items and you have rubbish or trash that you produce while here, take it with you. There's a bin behind that right corner that you could use. Let's respect the Heritage Center. And finally, some of you have been paying full parking prices. I think if you pay here at the center, you get a discount. I'm sorry about that misunderstanding. So hopefully you'll save some money today. Yeah, I believe that's all I have for now, and I'd like to introduce the first speaker of this morning's session. It's Ambassador David Balton, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Oceans and Fisheries at the Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs, U.S. Department of State. He's going to talk to us about results of the 2017 Arctic Council Ministerial. Ambassador Balton.
Yes, sir. All right, good morning, sir. Current slide, time, elapsed time, next slide.
Good.
And then you can either use arrow keys or this, whichever you feel comfortable.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, I'll be ready.
All right. Thank you very much, Pablo. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Yes, I will talk about the results of the Arctic Council Ministerial that took place in Fairbanks, Alaska in May of this year, and more broadly, the U.S. chairmanship of the Arctic Council that came to fruition on that day. I will keep my presentation relatively brief and will be happy to answer questions at the end. So, for those of you who don't know about the Arctic Council, let me just say a word or two about what it is. It is a high-level forum that was created by the 8 nations of the Arctic region roughly 20 years ago. The Ottawa Declaration, signed in September of 1996, gave birth to this entity. Indeed, we celebrated the 20th anniversary just a year ago or so. Like many 20-year-olds, it is still evolving. It has a lot of potential. It has already done some great work. I think it could do quite a bit more. It has a broad mandate. It focuses primarily on sustainable development and environmental protection. But in fact, the mandate can cover almost any topic, with one exception, and maybe particularly interesting for this group. In 1996, when it was created, the governments decided it would not deal with military security issues in the Arctic. Here's a quick look at the structure, at least as it existed during the U.S. chairmanship. Every 2 years, the ministers, and by this I mean the foreign ministers, U.S. Secretary of State and the other foreign ministers, meet. That's what happened in Fairbanks. The ministers decide on the overall work plan, sign some important documents, and then reconvene 2 years later to see how things went and set forward another 2-year plan. The day-to-day work of the Council is overseen by 8 people, 1 from each of the Arctic states. These are the so-called senior Arctic officials. The U.S. senior Arctic official, many of you may know her, Julie Gurley, who works with me at the Department of State. The Arctic Council has 6 standing working groups. You see them listed at the bottom. I'll mention them each a little bit more later. The countries indicated in red were those countries who were chairing each of those groups during the U.S. chairmanship. Some of those chairmanships have now changed. There were 4 time-limited groups that were also in operation during the U.S. chairmanship, 3 task forces and 1 expert group. Once again, I'll talk a little bit more about what they did in a moment. The thing that makes the Arctic Council unique is the participation of indigenous people from the Arctic in their own name and right, not as part of national delegations, but 6 so-called permanent participant organizations sit at the table, and their voice is essentially equal to that of those people representing the 8 governments. It is the aspect of the Arctic Council that I appreciate the most, actually. It gives a certain authenticity and authority and imbues the work of the Council with type of knowledge that otherwise would not be available to it. So, oops, I think I skipped one. Failed to mention there are also a lot of observers of the Arctic Council. In addition to the 8 governments that are members and the 6 permanent participant organizations, there were, at the start of the U.S. chairmanship, 32 accredited observer states and organizations. A few more were added. I'll talk more about that later. And they are a very active bunch and also lend a certain urgency and energy to the work of the Council. So the U.S. took over the chair in 2015. We had a very ambitious program in mind. We were focused on 3 particular topics. One was Arctic ocean security and stewardship. One was improving economic and living conditions for the people who actually live in the Arctic. And third was dealing with climate change in the Arctic. We chose the theme of One Arctic to emphasize the sense that we're all in this together. Here is just a laundry list of the types of things that we had proposed, the topics that we proposed to work on through the Arctic Council during our chairmanship, and that program was largely agreed to. Let's see how things actually played out. So these are the main accomplishments of the Arctic Council during the U.S. chairmanship. Probably the thing that got the most attention was the signing of a binding agreement on enhancing international scientific cooperation in the Arctic. This was a negotiation under the auspices of the Arctic Council. It was co-led by the United States and Russia. Yes, by the United States and Russia. And all 8 ministers signed this agreement in Fairbanks. And it's designed to help facilitate scientific research across international boundaries in the Arctic, break down barriers that exist to permitting, allow a freer flow of scientists and scientific equipment and material and data across international lines. I think this will help usher in a new age of Arctic scientific cooperation. I'm very happy about this particular development. One of the other task forces on telecommunications infrastructure produced the first ever assessment of telecommunications infrastructure in the Arctic. What do we actually have in place now? The idea being that in partnership with private sector and other stakeholders, the Arctic governments can help start, or could start, filling in the gaps of telecommunications in the Arctic. And indeed, under the current chair of the Arctic Council, Finland took over from the United States. That work is carrying forward. The third task force that operated under the U.S. chairmanship was known as the Task Force on Arctic Marine Cooperation. The idea for this task force was to take a look at the new Arctic Ocean, the Arctic Ocean that is opening up, and to consider whether the structures that we have currently in place in the Arctic to deal with the issues of the new Arctic Ocean are adequate. And if not, what more might be needed. This task force met quite a few times over the course of the 2 years. It did not produce an agreed way forward, except to say that its mandate is extended for another 2 years. And in 2019, it will produce, or it has a mandate to produce, the terms of reference for some new entity or body in which governments and other stakeholders could work together in the Arctic to deal with Arctic marine issues. That body would be part of the Arctic Council family, but its relationship to the existing Arctic Council structure is one of the things they will have to sort out. And in 2019, when the ministers meet, they will decide whether to establish this new body. The final special group that was going on during the U.S. chairmanship looked at black carbon and methane, two of the so-called short-lived climate forcers or climate pollutants in the Arctic. It produced a set of recommendations for how to mitigate emissions of both black carbon and methane. And indeed, there was agreed to a collective aspirational goal on black carbon emission reduction among the 8 countries meeting in Fairbanks. Now I'll just quickly mention that the 6 working groups of the Arctic Council all also had very busy and active agendas and produced a lot of things, and I don't have time to go through all of them, so instead I'll just give a few examples. The Arctic Contaminants Action Program, they mostly work on dealing with environmental problems in Russia. And one of the things they produced was a pilot program to demonstrate how wind diesel energy could be used at a plant in the Murmansk region. I thought that was actually quite exciting. The Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program is best known for its work on studying climate change and related issues in the Arctic, although they do much else as well. One of the things that they did during the U.S. chairmanship was to produce a new report on the cryosphere of the Arctic, snow, water, ice, and permafrost. And it showed what the changes have been over the last period of time, and it started to answer the question, what would the Arctic look like even if the Paris Agreement targets are fully realized? What would that mean for the Arctic? The working group on the conservation of Arctic flora and fauna also had a very busy and active agenda. One of the things it dealt with or produced was a report on the state of Arctic biodiversity generally. Amy Merton is here. She continues to chair the working group on emergency prevention, preparedness, and response. Also produced quite a lot of things. The thing I would mention by way of example, and Amy may want to talk more about this later, one of the other agreements to come out of the Arctic Council process years ago dealt with marine oil pollution. And this working group has responsibility for overseeing and sort of assessing implementation of that agreement. They conducted a tabletop exercise related to that and produced a number of products related to that, including an after-action report. The working group on the protection of the Arctic marine environment, also quite active at this time. Among other things, it produced a new database to track shipping throughout the Arctic, something that might be of particular interest to this group. Also, they were taking a look at an issue some of you may know about, the use and spillage of heavy fuel oil and other sorts of things from shipping in the Arctic. And finally, the Sustainable Development Working Group. Again, this is the one that is probably most related to the day-to-day lives of people residing in the Arctic. Among other things, did work on suicide prevention, mental wellness, also so-called One Health, operationalizing the One Health concept. There was some work across a number of topics, particularly on resilience. Here are some of the things that were produced during the U.S. chairmanship. And there was agreement in principle for the first time ever that the Arctic Council develop a long-term strategic plan, something that will occur in the next 2 years. I mentioned the observers. We did engage with the many observers listed there in some new ways throughout the U.S. chairmanship, and in Fairbanks, 7 new observers were admitted. Those are the ones highlighted in red. 1 new state observer, Switzerland, and 6 new organizations, some intergovernmental and some non-governmental. We are now in the Finnish chairmanship. They are off and running. It was a pleasure to work with my Finnish counterparts all along the U.S. chairmanship to prepare for this transition, and I am confident that they will have a similar series of successes to describe 2 years from now. After Finland comes Iceland, and on we go. So that was my presentation to you, and now I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ambassador. Let's open the floor to questions. Wait for the microphone, please.
Good morning. On one of the slides, you went by pretty quickly. There was a reference to an early warning indicator system. I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Not sure where that was.
It was back. Keep going. More, and more. Keep going. Keep going.
Sure.
There it is.
So
There it is, bullet. Thanks.
this was one of the topics that the U.S. proposed be worked on during the course of the chairmanship. And I'm not, maybe Amy knows better than I. Was this something EPPR did, or no, I don't think so. It may have been climate related that the Arctic Monitoring Assessment Program worked on. But the notion is to take a look at environmental and other data and give people a better sense of the changes that are coming our way. It wasn't, I'm not sure there was a particular product that came through at the end that completed this exercise, though. Sorry.
While we get the microphone to him, we got a few online questions too. Yeah, yeah, it's a new feature, this year. Participation in the ministerial by Secretary Tillerson was an encouraging sign of the importance of the Arctic in State Department. Are there other indicators of this importance?
Oh, well, Secretary Tillerson said while he was in Fairbanks chairing the ministerial meeting that the U.S. will remain fully engaged with the Arctic Council. And I'm confident that is true. Our interests as a nation in the Arctic haven't gone away. The things that we care about going on there, we still care about. We still are in the Arctic, thanks to Alaska and its people and its government very much want us remaining engaged there too. So I don't see that changing.
Thanks.
Thank you. Congratulations, Ambassador Balton. Job well done. I was heartened when you commented on the collaboration with your Finnish counterpart to help prepare them for their chairmanship. And I have no doubt at all that State and Coast Guard are collaborating closely on syncing what the Arctic Council does with the Arctic Coast Guard Forum and so on.
Yes.
Could you comment on what the prospects are for increasing the coordination or collaboration across to the Arctic Economic Council, the Arctic Circle effort, et cetera?
So there are a variety of Arctic fora that are operating somewhat in parallel, and I think that's what your question is getting at. There is, at least as I see it, a greater need to have them work together in some complementary or effective way. Some of these entities were actually established by the Arctic Council. So you mentioned the Arctic Economic Council. This is a group that was set up during the Canadian chairmanship that preceded ours. That was and is an effort to get the private sector working in the Arctic better coordinated among itself and to create the potential for partnership with the governments. And I think there is great potential to move forward there. The Arctic Coast Guard Forum, yes, was established recently as well. And there is already a pretty good coordination, I think, between the relevant work of the Arctic Council and that of the Arctic Coast Guard Forum. There's another entity, the Arctic Offshore Regulators. I forget what the last word in that title is. This is an effort to get the people who, in the governments who oversee offshore oil and gas development to be comparing notes with each other. The Arctic Circle was created outside the Arctic Council, and it has existed largely in parallel with the Arctic Council, but it might be an interesting thing to see if those efforts can somehow be harmonized over the course of time more.
We have another couple of online questions. Typically, they come to us as anonymous, but This next one has a name. The name is Robert Rich, and he wants to know if you've seen any changes in the U.S. Arctic Council agenda with the new administration.
So the U.S. chairmanship straddled two administrations, but the reality is that by the time the current administration took office, most of the work of the U.S. chairmanship was already either completed or nearly completed, and so in Fairbanks, a lot of that work was brought to fruition and approved without significant change. The one major, and I would say that the new administration has not articulated any new Arctic-specific policy yet. That said, each of the administrations I've been working in, and it goes back a long ways, has put its own stamp on U.S. Arctic policy, and I expect that in time this one will as well. But probably the thing that relates most directly, or is on people's minds most directly, this administration has decided to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, and how that relates to our approach to the Arctic is somewhat different from the approach that the last administration took, for sure.
Thanks. I don't see any more. Oh, okay, while Marie gets to the microphone, I have another online question.
Okay.
What's next under the Finnish chairmanship for the Task Force on Arctic Marine Cooperation that the U.S. is co-chairing? Can you speculate on that new body you referred to that the task force will create?
The task force has not yet met under the Finnish chairmanship. It does have a new and different mandate from what it had in the first 2 years, but it's going to be looking, at least my expectation is, much more concretely at what type of new entity, body, mechanism is needed to deal with the needs that the task force over the last 2 years identified. My own expectation is that 2 years from now, the ministers probably will decide to create some new architecture within the Arctic Council family to deal with marine issues.
Thanks. Marie, you get the last
Yep,
question.
thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Balton, for joining us this morning. We sure appreciate it, and especially the update on the Arctic Council.
Yes.
Could you just share with us, with the switch from the U.S. to Finland on the chairmanship, what Finland's priorities may be for the next 2 years?
Yes, be happy to. Finland wanted, of course, to carry forward a lot of the work that was underway during the U.S. chairmanship, much as we had wanted to carry forward some good work that was being done under the Canadian chairmanship before ours. But nevertheless, they introduced some new themes and topics that they wish to highlight. One of them is on education. Finns are big into education. They think they can work through the Arctic Council family, and particularly the University of the Arctic as a partner, to try to improve education at all levels, particularly in remote communities. Another topic of theirs is meteorology. It was not an accident that the World Meteorological Organization was one of the new observers admitted to the Arctic Council in Fairbanks. And I think the Finns want to use meteorology as one way into the climate issue in the Arctic over the next couple of years. And they want to move forward on the telecommunications work that we started. They want to broaden it. They have this word connectivity that they use to describe what they hope to accomplish. So those are some of the new themes that Finland has brought forward.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your contribution.
Okay.
And we'll see you in 2 years.
Okay.